Welcome everyone to our April statistics and blog on the real estate market. I'm David Geary.
Daniel Hastings here, hi, and David, as usual, we're starting off with some observations and stats from the Wollongong market in particular.
Well, actually the Wollongong region. So what we're doing is the Illawarra zone. And what I've gone back and done some statistics on how many people always ask that question. How many properties are selling in the marketplace, which is a good gauge on where the market's going. At the moment, in our region, in our Wollongong regional, we have 203 transactions happening, which a good thing about that is it's very, very consistent from the month before.
Is that in the month, you're saying?
In the month. April month we had 203,
Yep.
but the month before was a very, very similar statistic. So it's very interesting that it's been fairly level of the sales.
Yeah.
And the interesting stat out of all that, 136 of them were Torrens title houses in the whole zone.
Okay.
So the majority of them are houses.
Interesting, yeah.
Okay. And the worst stat was residential land. Now, please, this stat doesn't take into account the brand new developers or the actual the land subdivisions as well, because they don't get transacts to after settlement, etc. as well, so it could be months down the track. But what was actually transacted and exchanged and settled in April was only 7 blocks.
Yeah, right.
What's your thoughts about that?
7 blocks. Well, I mean, okay, again, forgetting the estate areas and so forth, but when you're seeing that even in a sort of more established sort of locations around the region, it's not a lot.
No.
And the reason for that possibly is that I think you're seeing that with the change in the market that we've seen in the last, let's say 12, 18 months in particular, you're probably seeing a situation now where existing properties have now become more affordable and therefore maybe perhaps more viable compared to buying the land and building the property as well. I guess building costs don't change a huge amount. Maybe land values can a little bit. So obviously it would seem to me maybe that we're just seeing, because they are slightly different markets, land sales in an established area versus land sales in the estate area, you know, it is a different sort of situation. And maybe that's a sign of those sort of statistics where you're seeing those situations come more viable for the existing proproperties.
And more affordable basically for
more
people
affordable
to buy a second-hand house than it is to go off and build a new one.
It seems so at the moment.
And I noticed that also building costs haven't got any cheaper as well.
No,
They've continued to rise and not meeting where the market is. The real estate market has obviously changed down as well.
So it'll be interesting to observe the new estate market in the near future as well. Okay, so now going back into Wollongong in the city itself, what are your observations there at the moment?
Okay, yeah, the city actually hasn't had a huge amount of change since we last spoke anyway. The funny thing is, because of the demographics of the area, Wollongong hasn't got a lot of Torrens title property left. And the transactions in Wollongong, the suburb, was only 3 Torrens title properties.
There you go.
Not a lot, is it?
And one of those would have been what we spoke about last month in the terrace house at 50 Campbell Street in Wollongong. So that's a terrace home joined, so almost unit style you could say, but it was an original terrace from 1880s circa. So really that means two traditional houses.
2 traditional houses.
Yeah.
On the flip side of the coin, I know that everyone's seen the amount of actual apartments being built out in the city. That has stayed consistent from March to April. And basically April stats said that still 19 sales of strata title properties going on through and being transaction in this month. Which is pretty good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So stats are showing our region is still bucking the trend a little from other areas. And I think that what we were just talking earlier about with the RBA and the finance has got some thoughts there as well. Yeah,
we were talking off camera. I mean, certainly there's more talk, and it's continued this morning in the press as well about interest rates and the likelihood. Some inflation figures came out, there wasn't big growth in inflation, etc. So from that perspective, that's obviously having some pressure on interest rates. And the talk is, and it has been probably for a few weeks now, that there will be changes, but if it's changed, it'll be down. And I think, it's probably only a couple of years ago, 18 months to 2 years ago, that was saying if there was a change, it'd probably go up. So it's interesting how things have evolved, so much for economists and their predictions, I guess, at times. But so it'll be interesting to see if that does come to fruition. They're talking about 2 changes, perhaps May, but at least maybe June, July for the first one. So that's interesting times. And what does that say? Well, a few things. I mean, number one, it's going to be quite affordable for buyers. It's going to be a little bit more affordable for current mortgage holders that are perhaps looking at their options for investment, etc. as well. But I think it also suggests that perhaps we're not too far away, if not already, at the settling point in the marketplace as well. Yeah, from that perspective, I think we've certainly felt like that prices are a lot more predictable now. During the course of 2018 in particular, we were always chasing the downward slide that was happening in market values. Now, I think when you and I go out to an appraisal, it is certainly a lot more predictable when you're looking at the stats from 2019 in particular, maybe late 2018. So yeah, I think there's a lot of signs when you hear those sort of things going on economically, the things that we're seeing on the ground. I know there's a lot of people still saying there's going to be significant slides in 2019, but I don't know if that'll be...
That's changing actually, because there's sort of, like you get 10 economists, they give you 10 different answers about the economy.
Yes.
Well, that's the same with the real estate as well, where people are saying different things. But I still see things that are more happening where people are saying that it's actually getting, as you said, towards the bottom, settling where we are already, and the market is probably getting close to its change, and that could happen the rest of this year. Yes, don't get me wrong, but next year it could be improving. So
it'll be interesting, and I think, look, what you've got to remember too, the economists rely on statistics. Now, those statistics sometimes take a couple of months.
Yeah, they're usually
they're coming from the Bureau of Statistics or whatever the case may be. They have to rely on those that data, which is practically speaking a couple of months old. So from that perspective, we're seeing it on the ground. We're seeing a different situation, probably a little bit more advanced in the type of reporting that perhaps we can do, at least for the Illawarra, of course.
I agree. And I did notice as well, just from our stats from our sales meetings that we had, that our open house numbers actually have increased.
Absolutely.
And it's been from the beginning of the year compared to now, it's more than doubled. It's probably tripled.
Yeah.
So
we had a number of properties the weekend after the long weekends that we had, the Easter and then the Anzac sort of long weekend, if you want to call it that. And statistics at our open houses there were huge. A couple of open houses, a few open houses, in fact, getting 20 plus groups through. So that's the sort of numbers that we weren't. We were seeing a fair bit in the so-called hot markets. So so interesting times.
Yeah, it is. Is there anything we'd like to discuss, or do you think that's a wrap?
I think that's a wrap.
All right.
Thanks again.
See you next month.